Okay, so what do we have here? Using system.collections, using system.collections.generic, using Unity Engine. This is like little libraries you can import into your script. For instance, in the future, we'll be using one called unityengine.ui, and that's when we start interacting with the user interface. But we won't get to that just yet. So we have this public class, Elfman Controller. This is the name we gave it, Elfman Controller. And a class is like a collection of code. And public means that it's available and everyone else can see it. So some of this won't make sense right now, I understand that, but just be aware that we created this and called it Elfman Controller. All right? We don't need to know what every single thing does, but as you get to coding, you'll start to see patterns. You got to just keep doing it and then ask questions. Keep doing it, ask questions, and it'll start to make sense. Okay, so I have this void start here and then this void update. Now, it won't make any sense when I explain to you what void means. Void means that this is a function right here. It's a collection of code that does something. There's nothing in it right now. And this is also a function. It does something. It's a collection of code. And when it says void, it means it doesn't return anything after it runs. So some collections of code would return something like a number or a value or a string of words. This one doesn't return anything, and neither does this one. That's all that void means. Again, I understand that just went way over your heads. Don't worry about that. Somewhere in the back of your mind, it'll be easier to understand the next time someone explains it, and then even easier the next time someone explains it. You just got to keep going. That's the thing about coding. So you don't have to worry about some of these words and what they mean. They'll start to make sense. So I'm going to type out some code, and I want you to follow along, okay? And I promise you, as you go, it'll start to make more sense, and you'll start to feel confident coding. So what we're going to do is we're going to type in just one line of code up here, animator, and then a semicolon. All this is doing is I'm declaring what type of class I want. I want to find an animator, and we're just going to call it animator. All right, now look, we have this animator here on our guy, and we want to grab this and then do things to it. We want to be able to access what's in this animator here, so we can change values and change from one animation state to another. That's all we're doing. We're grabbing this animator here with that line of code, or we're declaring it as a variable so that we can grab it. In the next step, in start here, we're going to initialize this variable. Okay? I know some of that doesn't make sense. Don't worry about it. So go ahead and type animator equals get component animator. All right? So what we have here is before we run start runs at the very beginning of the game, and update runs every single frame of the game. All right? That's kind of an important thing to note. This runs before we get started, or right as we start the game, and this runs every single frame, over and over again, every frame, this whole line of code. This could be thousands of lines right here. It would run every frame. And if it was extremely long, it might bog down your game and you'd have low frame rates. But for all the games we'll be creating, it won't even be an issue. So up here we declare a variable, and I'm going to make a note. You can make a note in coding by doing 2 slashes, and I'm going to say this is where we declare variables. Variables is another scary term. All it means is it's a placeholder. It's a name we give something that will hold some value of some kind. All right, it could be a number, it could be a string, it could be a Boolean, which means true or false. Up here we declare variables, and we've just declared a variable for an animator. Down here we assign variables a value. We could have assigned it a value up here, but it's easier right here to do it right here at start. So we're calling animator this name we gave it, and we're giving it a value with the equal sign of get component animator. And this function right here, we're just calling a function that is going in and it's grabbing this animator right here. So then we have access to everything that's in it. Right now it's just idle in it. But when we start dragging other animations in there, like jumping, or run, or walk, we'll have access to these values. Okay? That's all that's going on there. Next in update, we want to do something with this animator. So what can we do with this animator? Let's go ahead and type variable x is equal to input.getAxis horizontal times time dot delta time times 150, and I add an F here because it's a floating point value. That means that there's a decimal after the 0. It's not just a whole number, it's a floating point. So it could be 150.0001. That's all that float means. Time.delta time means we have time in a game in seconds, but we have delta time, which deals with frames. And because frame rates can differ in a game, we use this delta time. This input.getAxis could be your keyboard or your mouse. And we're going to get axis horizontal. Well, what does that mean? Well, that means left to right. And we just assigned x this value and then multiplied it times delta time times 150. Okay, so this axis right here, you can see these within Unity. If we go to Edit, Project Settings, and Input, if we click on Axes, see we have this horizontal, vertical, Fire 1, Fire 2, Fire 3, a bunch of presets set up for us. And horizontal is the first one. And the negative button's left, the positive button's right. You're also familiar, if you're any kind of gamer, with ASDF, right? So A or D will move side to side as well. S and W will move up and down. If I go to vertical here, S and W are up and down keys, all right? So you're familiar with vertical inputs, and that's just how we access it in code. That's all that's doing there. No big deal. So why don't we also get the vertical axis? So variable z equals input.getAxis vertical. Oh, I need parentheses around that. Vertical times time dot delta time times 3. Okay, what we can do, because I know this doesn't make a ton of sense to you, even though I explained it, I get it, because I remember the first time I learned to code and someone said time.delta time, and my eyes glazed over. That's just this big old annoying sounding word. And F, what on earth, floating point values? Don't worry about it, okay? I promise you, you keep going and delving into coding. It's like learning to swim, learning a foreign language. At first, it's like, this makes no sense, but the further you go in, the more you have a command of it, you start to feel powerful. You start to feel like you could code anything, and it's an amazing feeling, but you'll only get there if you don't stop. So what will be done here? Again, we've assigned a little variable value. We've gotten the axis vertical, which means the up and down arrow keys, and those are floating point values, and that's why we're using the floating point when we're multiplying it out. And we're multiplying it times time.delta time, which means per frame. In fact, we're assigning this every frame. Okay, so every time a new frame hits, we're going to grab whatever's going on with the keyboard. Every single frame. So we don't wait a second to grab the keyboard. Otherwise, we'd have really laggy, delayed, awful games. We do it every single frame. So that's why this note's here. Update is called every once per frame, and use this for initialization. So what's going to happen here? Well, nothing's going to happen. All we've done is assigned a variable. I know this is getting to be a long tutorial, so I'm going to pause it there, and we'll come back in the next one, and we'll start to actually do something with this code.